We're gonna cover whether or not the carnivore diet or higher carb-based diet is better for overall health and sports performance, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from GarageStrength.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in becoming a better athlete, you want to be more explosive, you want to get stronger, you want to recover a little bit better, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So fitness enthusiasts and athletes alike love to look for that next magical pill, that next quick fix. What can we do to get us to that next level really quickly? What can we eat to lose as much weight as possible in the shortest time frame? And there's been fad diets that have come and gone and then come back again. There's been multiple different forms of those fad diets, and that begs the question is, which of these diets is actually more effective? Is it better to go low carb? Is it better to go high carb and low fat? Is it better to just focus on a balanced diet, and then we can sort of take these things and just keep rolling along and trying to sustain a normal diet over a long period of time? All of these questions pop into our heads. There's a lot of different information. There's a lot of frustration that goes into nutrition. And that's where we're going today, is we're gonna compare the carnivore diet and a higher carb-based diet. But before we even go into that, we've got to understand the basic premise of weight loss and of our body and how our body performs. And if we can think about what goes into weight loss, what goes into general health, we've got to start to think about TDEE, so total daily energy expenditure. So what is TDEE? TDEE is going to be our calories out. And what is going to impact that? We're gonna have BMR, so that's gonna be your basal metabolic rate. Okay, so that's if you're doing your Netflix and chill for 5 hours throughout the day. What is your basal metabolic rate? When you're laying there watching Netflix, how many calories does your body need to just lay there? Then we've got non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so that's gonna be what I'm doing right now. How many calories am I burning while I'm moving my hands? Then thermic effect of food, TEF. That's gonna be how many calories does my body utilize to pull energy and nutrients out of food. And then finally, we've got exercise activity. So that's going to be the factor of calories out. So now we can start to think about the carnivore diet, carb-based diet. These are going to be bringing calories in. And so we've got to have a basic understanding of calories in and calories out is this simple equation. And that's really what everything comes down to. And now if we can start to understand, what is a carnivore diet, right? A carnivore diet, it's not technically a ketogenic diet. It's going to be a diet that's going to be a little bit higher in protein than a typical standard ketogenic diet. It's going to have almost no carbs whatsoever. So all of the foods that you'll eat if you're on a carnivore diet are going to be meat-based sources. So you're going to be eating chicken, you're going to be eating beef, you're going to be eating bacon, you're going to be eating eggs. All of these different foods that are solely going to provide fat and protein. And again, it's going to be higher in protein than a standard ketogenic diet. Now, if we're talking about a carb-based diet, let's just actually define this. And if we can think about this for our scenario, carb-based diet, 40% of our diet is going to be from protein, 35% of our diet is going to be from carbohydrates, and that leaves 25% from fat. So that's a pretty standard balanced diet, a little bit higher in protein for some people, but it's a pretty standard diet that we can sort of compare now. This carb-based diet that's much higher in carbohydrates, and now we can take that and compare it to the carnivore diet, a diet that a lot of people claim they get very lean on. They feel really good, their stomach feels really good. And so right off the bat, we can start to really look at these two diets from a very nice comparison perspective. We can start to sit there and say, all right, let's create a couple different comparisons and actually see which one would win out in a long term case study, let's say 6, 12 months. And right off the bat, we're going to talk about sustainability. And I think one of the very interesting aspects behind the carnivore diet and any low carb diet, ketogenic diet as well, is that for me personally, I was upwards of 300 pounds. So when I was walking around extremely overweight, I ended up going on a low carb diet. My brother suffers from epilepsy. He was on a ketogenic diet and he felt very good on a ketogenic diet. He didn't have seizures anymore. And so I started to do my own research into nutrition, and I got into ketosis, ketogenic diet. I got into the carnivore diet a little bit, and I lost a significant amount of weight. But why did that happen? What ends up happening is you're fully removing an entire macronutrient. You're taking out carbohydrates entirely. So immediately, if we can go back to that calories out and the calories in, now we're starting to recognize right off the bat, you're taking out a full macronutrient. So it's going to be less calories right away. So from that perspective, we can see, one, with weight loss, the carnivore diet right up front is going to win that battle. But now when we go back to our original question, what about sustainability? And I think that that's something that we've got to talk about. That's a key component. All of these things are extremely key to understand behind that longevity of a meal plan, of a nutrition plan. And now when we start to factor in, if we're talking about sustainability, I want to be healthy for the rest of my life. I don't want to just lose 50 pounds and then in a year, 2 years, I start to eat more carbs again, and then I deal with that issue that I have where I just want to eat more carbs, I want to eat more potato chips, and then all of a sudden I back up at 300 pounds. And that's something that happens with people who tend to go on and off of these fad diets. They come upon that next fad diet. Is it the carnivore diet? Is it a low carb? Is it a low fat? Whatever it might be. And they're just bouncing around over and over again. And that actually leads to some serious health concerns. And so from a sustainability perspective, when we're talking about that carb diet, now we're getting 35% of our calories from carbohydrates. We're also getting 40% from protein. We're getting 25% from fat. And that's a pretty balanced diet, which makes it a lot easier to uphold, a lot easier to be sustainable long term. And that's where that carbohydrate diet comes into play. Think about if we're going out to eat. If I'm going out to eat with my friends and I'm on a carnivore diet and I go to order food, I'm like, nope, I'm not eating that. I'm on the carnivore diet. You almost feel like an idiot. So you want to look at things from different perspectives. If you want to lose a lot of weight in a really short time frame, again, that's where the carnivore diet is going to be victorious, especially if you're not factoring in total calories in underneath the carbohydrate-based diet. If we can think about it from that balanced diet, you got to do a little bit more effort up front to figure out how many carbs, how much protein, how much fat do I need. You've got to track your macronutrients if you want to lose weight under the balanced diet. Now, let's take us into fuel and training. And this is one thing that a lot of people they'll love to talk about, how once you're on the carnivore diet, now I'm in ketosis. You can say you're in ketosis all you want, but your body still utilizes glycogen. Your body needs glycogen for certain parts of the brain. Your body needs glycogen for red blood cells. It has to have glycogen. And if we're eating a balanced diet, now we're also going to have more glycogen in our muscle fibers. We're going to have more energy. And there's a lot of research that people who eat a lower carb diet will lose glycogen very early on in a training session, maybe 15 to 20 minutes into a training session. They're type 2 muscle fibers, the muscle fibers that are responsible for recruiting high threshold motor units. All of a sudden, all of the glycogen is depleted within 10 to 15 minutes. If we're actually consuming carbohydrates, when we consume carbohydrates, our body, our saliva, amylase, all of a sudden starts to break down those carbohydrates, and over time throughout our body, we get into our liver, it's converted into glucose, it goes through our bloodstream, and over time it's turned into glycogen inside of our muscles, and that's when we're starting to utilize it more effectively in training. So there might be some benefits to being in ketosis. You're going to utilize ketones. That's great. You're going to feel decent after about a week of being in ketosis. But using carbohydrates and glucose is really, really effective for your body. That's what your body utilizes to create ATP. So if we want to talk about fuel and training, we know that glycogen is a key component to ATP. So we went out in the balanced diet here. Now let's get into gut health. With gut health, this is an interesting one because a lot of people will notice early on in carnivore that they'll have diarrhea and they feel like they're getting cleansed and all this stuff. But it's pretty interesting because Justin Sonnenberg has done a ton of research on microbiota accessible carbohydrates. There's been a ton of research on resistant starches and what those types of carbohydrates can do for gut health, for your microbiome. And we know that people who are leaner, they have a greater amount of microbiota inside their stomach. The microbiota is utilized then to digest various forms of food. So we know MACs, microbiota accessible carbohydrates, we know that resistant starch plays a key role in gut health. We know that some of the research from Justin Sonnenberg, we've seen that with a lot higher fat content, there can be a negative response in the gut. It's not a huge negative response, but it's a lot more negative than if we were eating those carbohydrates. So up front, right away, I would say the balanced diet will win out on gut health simply based off of microbiota accessible carbohydrates, MACs, and resistant starch, and the role that those two factors play on your overall gut health and the health of your microbiome. Now, I brought in dairy into this, and the reason why I brought dairy into this is that I lost a ton of weight because I stopped consuming dairy early on. I went from weighing 300 pounds down to 280 almost immediately. Again, I mentioned I went on a very strict low carb diet, almost carnivore-ish, right? And one of the things that I had done is I was drinking 1.5 gallons of milk a day. I was chugging milk all the time. I grew up on milk. I love everything that you can think about when it comes down to dairy. And when I was doing my research early on, I started to think, well, you know, nobody else is drinking other animals' milk. And it's that classic argument that a lot of people say, which is actually completely worthless. It's not founded in anything. And we actually have a ton of research and meta-analysis that show that people who consume dairy tend to be leaner. They tend to be leaner because we've adapted to consuming dairy. And I actually choose to drink whole raw milk. And so what I ended up doing here is that when I stopped the low carb diet, I slowly added in dairy, and instead I chose to control myself and not drink 1.5 gallons of milk a day, but instead drink 0.5 gallon of milk a day. And so when we're following a balanced diet and when we understand total daily energy expenditure as calories in, calories out, dairy can play a very important role, not only in your overall general health as we've seen, but also in your general performance as an athlete. If you're consuming dairy products like whey protein, casein protein, we know that these forms of protein are extremely effective for gaining lean muscle mass. So we should, if your body can tolerate lactose, we should have dairy in our nutrition program because we know it's going to help with recovery, we know it's going to help with fueling ourselves, and it tastes freaking good. So overall, this is going to be an interesting recap here. Well, obviously, what I'm going to tell you is that the balanced carbohydrate diet is going to win out. But if the carnivore diet works well for you, and if it helps you keep your calorie intake lower, then by all means, do it. That's my stance, is that a lot of people really buy into dogma of low carb, high carb, all these different things, balanced diets even. If you found that you can only stay lean on a carnivore diet, and your goal is to stay lean and you don't care about eating carbohydrates, and you find it that you feel healthier and all your blood markers with inflammation show that you're perfectly healthy, your C-reactive protein is low, your cholesterol is low in comparison to HDL and the LDL ratio, now all of a sudden, as long as you're following that carnivore diet and you feel better and you're leaner, just do it. That's perfectly fine. But don't spread hate and dogma that carbohydrates are killing everybody and all these things are evil, because we know it can help with fueling the workouts. You can still lose weight when you're eating carbohydrates. You can have a healthier gut when you're eating carbohydrates. you can drink raw milk that tastes really good, tastes like ice cream. If carnivore diets work for you, by all means, continue to do them. On top of that, if I have an athlete who's got to cut a lot of weight in 5 or 6 days, I'm putting them on a carnivore diet for a very short period of time, because the goal for that moment is to drop a lot of water weight, to drop a lot of weight immediately. Now, when we weigh in and we refuel, we're going to do some different stuff. But that's a key component here, is that do what works for you. And ultimately, this is the number one factor. Do whatever you can do over a long period of time to optimize your health. So if you want a custom nutrition program that's going to help you be sustainable, feel better, perform better, and feel healthy for a long period of time, you can head over to garagestrength.com and pick up your custom nutrition program. If you want more information about nutrition, you can click on this video right here. Until next time, guys, peace.